I finally got back on. I'm sorry, guys. Hi, Jordan. Dean, good to see you. Rick, good to see you. Thanks for coffee yesterday. And I just started recording, and I know Richard's written a book which I'd like to talk about and promote. But when I um, initially connected with Richard, I said I'm at a crossroads because I'm trying to help U13 female coaches, and they're doing drills and they're good drills. The repetition is fine, but the teaching is not progressive and intense. It doesn't really teach them to think. And I'm of the belief that most coaches today aren't educated to teach and accomplish a purpose in planning their own drills. And they don't learn, the players don't learn to think. So I asked Richard about this, and Richard, you were talking about your under 18 team and the drill, the game that you borrowed from Tom, and a lot of us have stolen games and drills from Tom. And I really think that I'd sure like you to, if you don't mind, just go back to your starting point. I'm of the belief now, Jordan and Rick, that I really believe all the teams I'm watching at U15 and U13 practices, and they're very good traditional deliberate practices with a purpose, but not the thinking. So I would love to see a lot more competitive small area games. And I'm going to leave it at that, Richard. And let's see if what you say and anybody else can say can change the minds of coaches.
One of the reasons I took on this team in July, and we're in tryouts now. It's the only team that has, the U18 is the only age group that has tryouts out here in the OMHA in August, September. Everybody else does it in April. Because after doing my Sept presentation to the coaches in April and doing a follow-up in August, I wanted to demonstrate to them the approach and how it works. The response from the players has been very positive. They love playing. I mean, they're 16, 17 years old. They want to play. They've seen every drill in existence, every system, every power play, watching practices before and after me. Well, mostly before, because we practice later at night. And they're doing the circle drill. And the one guy had out, he had more toys out on the ice the other night in the practice before me. He had, those big black pads that you used to divide the rink. He had them stacked in front of a net so that the kids that are 11 or years old or 12 years old have to shoot over the pad into an open net, so that they had like that much net left to shoot at. And he had them going around, all kinds of toys on the ice. And the whole practice was like that, because I'm popping in and out of the dressing room and I'm watching what's going on. And it was almost aggravating to watch, because there was no learning taking place. There was no game-like situation. There was no competitive component, floating in on goaltenders and shooting. And the more I looked at it, the more I've read about the research into the linear approach. There is no support for the linear approach anywhere. In fact, there was just a study I got the other day. In fact, Dean sent it to me from a group, this guy named Keith Davids. His name seems to be everywhere when it comes to looking at the ecological approach to coaching, ecological dynamics, and comparing the linear approach to the ecological approach in various sports. And I was talking to Dean the other day about it, and the head of a rugby organization overseas looked at this guy's practice and called it lazy coaching. You're not doing any coaching. You're just standing there and watching, because the president of the club doesn't know anything about it. The players lap it up. They're playing hockey. I mean, it's a sport is competitive by definition. You know, it's just, but there has to be, you have to have a reason for doing what you're doing. So like the two things I did last night was a 3-on-3 cross ice I was explaining before, Wally, that I got from Tom. 3 pucks, starts with 3 pucks, and then 2 pucks, then 1 puck till the shift is over. Like we did that for half an hour. I stopped them twice to review a couple of points, and the rest of it, they just played. And then the second 3-on-3 was between the blue lines, because I wanted to see and a joker or rover behind the blue line to pass for breakouts and puck retrieval. And they're going full bore. Like they did not stop for 35 minutes in that one. I stopped them a couple of times. No, once. Meanwhile, I was bouncing back and forth from bench to bench to discuss, you know, things that were going on the ice. But I saw an awful lot in those 3-on-3 games because I made the rules such that let's focus on, you know, 2 or 3 things that I wanted to focus on in preparation for our exhibition game tonight. Can't hear you, Wally.
This group totally understands, and we all believe what you're talking about. And I have to admit that while we may appreciate your languaging, like ecological or whatever, the average coach I'm working with, it's a distraction. It's an academic explanation of common sense. You think when you play instinctively, you figure it out. And I totally agree. That drill. Now, did you work on deliberate breakouts?
No.
And you're going to play a game. Is there a point at which you should work on deliberate breakouts?
No.
I love it.
Okay, well, I'm going to bring up the point, and then Tom can speak to this. He had me come out Thursdays to practice because nobody else would join him. I did a deliberate progression for breakout. They just didn't play games and suddenly break out. We went into a end zone breakout routine to the low winger with open pivoting, targeting, facing the puck on each side, goalies passing, then coaches passing, learning how to support low at the goal line, receive it moving before the hash mark in theory. And then we brought in a center who came across the middle. But that what I'm saying here is my deliberate teaching progression, I felt made the difference with Tom because he's played lots of games. But the idea of breaking down breakout and providing quick low support and the tactical skills of open pivoting, front foot stop, T start, targeting, like I'm anal about that. So I don't just feel they're going to get the breakout as well as they could. They've got to play the games, but there's a point at which you can do the deliberate practicing and see the payoff. Now, Tom, I don't know if you want to refer to that, but it's a good opportunity because I know that when Richard, you did the neutral zone game and you had to regroup with the person behind the net, yeah, they're naturally going to support in an available high lane, not come to a goal line. I'm just saying that I did it deliberately that way because if they learn to provide low support, and in a game read, they don't have to come low but are open high, that's what the game's about. We just help them figure it out a little bit. Tom, can you talk about that?
Well, I think you combine the two things. So we practice today, and then we have to cut 6 players or reassign them to the lower level.
Reassign.
Yeah, well, they basically are because there are affiliates.
Yeah.
There are affiliates, but they got to spend another year of developing.
Yeah.
So we'll do that. But on tonight we'll have a practice, which is more. I'm just doing it right now, and it starts with this. A shoot, skating and shooting to warm up the goalies. We have 3 goalies still, and then do this regroup, and then have 3 nets on the ice and play 3 games, a little tournament of 4-on-4, and then a transition game, 2-on-2 to 4-on-4, and 3-on-2 to 5-on-5, and then and we have to leave them 15 minutes early to call the players in, I guess. And the other players will play a full ice game of 1 pass in each zone. But on Saturday we have a game time, but we couldn't get a game, so we're gonna do a lot of team play on Saturday, because I really believe it doesn't happen unless you've taught it. So we'll do team play walkthrough, like what Wally said there, and and always put it in a game situation after. But we won't keep on reteaching it forever and ever. Every once in a while, we'll touch on it if the players seem to be really off course. But I believe you do the combination. And that game you talked about, I learned from Wally about a dozen years ago. He came to one of my practices and ran it. So yeah, that's my thought on how you use games. But there's this Ennio Socoloto, I think his name is. He has a drill of the week club that coaches from all over the world send in stuff. And what I've been doing this for about 6 months, is I'm taking a game. You're supposed to put a game in there. So I do one every day, and I'm taking the games out of it. So I've got, I don't know, I got about 10 seasons of games, and it'd be interesting. I think you guys would be interested in seeing, like, these are coaches from everywhere, and the different kinds of games. A lot of things I've never even thought about in there. But yeah, those are my thoughts.
Can I just bring up a point about language that you mentioned earlier, Wally? You're muted.
Go ahead, Richard.
Okay, you mentioned language and ecological and all the fancy terminology, which I'm using here because this group is pretty well versed in what those things mean, and you've heard it and seen it and read about it. I don't use that with other coaches. I use the well, I don't want to say dumbed down, but simplified version. So as an example, I had to meet with the parents last night. We're still in tryouts. And the idea was to meet with the parents of the kids still trying out, to give them an idea. Well, they had to see what the team budget was going to be. Is this for me? Can I afford it? I had to tell them what tournaments we were going to. Are we still interested in doing that? And then I gave them an outline of my approach. And I actually put on my website, or on the hockey team's website, I give them the outline of the approach. I'm going to do a weekly blog to explain why we're doing what we're doing. So that when they're sitting in the stands, I already warned them, I don't want to see anybody standing at the glass banging on the glass, because you'll see me in your face right away. But when you're sitting in the stands and watching your kid do this stuff, why are they doing 2v2 with this rule and that rule? What's the idea behind it? So I'm going to explain it to them. They're not the enemy. I want them on side. And when I explained it to them last night, I saw a lot of the dads' heads nodding when I was explaining to them the approach I'm using. I said, you're not going to see flow drills. You're not going to see circle drills. You're not going to see pylons on the ice. You're going to see competitive game-like activities that focus on 1 or 2 things. And we're going to spend, 20, 30 minutes on those things and then move on to something else, which is what I did last night. Like the 3-on-3 blue line one, with one player behind the blue line retrieving the puck. I told the parents beforehand, this is what we're going to do, and here's why. Because I want to see which kids understand how to find space, and which kids understand how to funnel, puck carriers into an area on the rink, which are fundamental precepts of the game. And I saw probably 9 or 10 dads nodding their heads. They'd never seen this before. They had no idea what this was. No clue. So the language is really important, but as I have said time and time again, there have to be people who There have to be people in leadership positions in the game in this country who are willing to step up and explain why this approach, whether it's a hybrid approach, as Tom just alluded to, or just a complete CLA type approach, that it needs to be explained. We are the only hockey country on the planet that is not doing it. The only one, except the odd person. And I am a very odd person. So do you see the odd person out there doing it? Like Brian Gillum in Ottawa, he took over the coaching role from me when I left, the head of the coaching program. He's doing it. You don't see it anywhere else. You don't see it explained anywhere else. You don't hear from the people in Hockey Canada anywhere. You hear the Americans, you hear the Czechs, you hear the Finns, you hear the Swedes, but nobody else. So if nobody in a leadership position is doing it, then you go out and you watch practices and you see the toys and 1-on-0 and, well, they're doing it in soccer. They're doing it in the field. Well, really? Who's watching soccer in this country when you're involved in hockey?
Well, Richard, I'm glad John got on this morning because I'm sure he's biting at the bit to get his 2 bits in. When Jordan gets back, I'm always referring to the, and I don't, to me, it's a need. And Jordan does a deliberate breakout drill where you break out from each corner going the length of the ice diagonally, and it's masterful. It's a deliberate drill that teaches low support, center timing, and breakout passing. And it's deliberate. It's not thinking under pressure. But I'm hoping to have Jordan do that drill and record it and have him do a bit of a seminar on it, plus a couple other things he does that progress into free thinking and free play. So, John, you've heard the hockey guys here talk, and when I first watched you years ago in the gym with Hockey Alberta, and I appreciated what you were doing. I didn't really understand it as much and appreciate it as much then as I do now. So, John, have you met Richard before? I'm sure you
Yes,
have. Okay.
we have met. Yes,
Go ahead, John, and then I'm going to ask Rick to think about things because of all the coaches I know, he is one of the best teaching, behavioral coaching, and technical teaching coaches that I've ever seen, and he gets results. So, John, go ahead.
Hi, Wally. Yeah, I have seen. Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, is that good? Okay. Yeah, I know Richard. We have met a few times now through a podcast and talk about this. This is, again, fascinating because now we're talking about 2 different, not sports, but invention games and the way we approach the teaching part. So I think this have to do with the traditional way of coaching that we have been taught, either because an influence from the culture we live on, and the way we approach personally or we experiment with it. So I think I've been doing it for many years. I took the approach of more ecological dynamics that we were talking, Richard is mentioning, a nonlinear approach means I let the players find a solution, yet, Wally, I think we all will agree that we need to design the training in a way they can get challenged to achieve what we want. And I think that's when these 2 worlds collide and the way we teach. Tom said that we can use both, and I do agree with that. I think you can experiment with both. For me, the experimentation stopped I don't know, 30 years ago, 35 years ago, I took one path and I say I should refine this way of coaching. I believe the solution is allowing the players to interact with their environment, the practice, the challenges they face, and they go from there. And then you can give feedback. Of course, you have to give feedback. Of course, you have to set up some sort of frame. Wally, like you say, what is a breakout in hockey? Because I've done it. And I experimented with my kids, by the way. So, and I told them the idea is to get the puck out. Now, what is going to happen? I don't know. I can't tell you what is going to happen. You can tell them, well, this is what I want. You go low, and then you get the puck, and you cut close to the winger, and you can explain so many things. But I never believed that that was a solution. What I believe at the time is they have to find out the solution on that precise moment, on that precise action that is presented to them. So they have to be able to find solutions on their own. Now the breakout is there. They need to get the puck out of their zone. Well, I'll figure out. Wally, I always go to Bobby Orr and these great players. I don't think they need to be taught how to get the puck out of their zone. They know they get the puck, they get the head up, and they make decisions. And that's what I think the difference between this more free way of teaching, where we coaches set up. I believe you need to set up the environment for that. And when you challenge the players in different ways, many different ways, they will find the solutions under pressure when they need to do it. And I think that's critical to understand how we do things here. So,
John, before you go any further, you mentioned Bobby Orr. To me, it's not relevant. We're talking about kids learning, and I'm at a U13 level now, but whole ice U11, and half ice is great because there isn't a whole ice surface where they start off with a face off and have positions. So I understand, and we all understand the idea of the thinking and going to be at the right place at the right time. In fact, anticipate and be at the right place at the right time defensively as much as offensively. And that's the one thing that frightens me, is that everybody looks at the pros and they think they should just get that way because they play games. And it may happen. I know teams that have just played games and have been very successful. And if I could do that and just have coaches play games, they would be better off than running any drills. And I don't know that we can swing the pendulum. I think it is something that coaches who aren't educated at teaching, that are trying to teach through deliberate drills, because that's what they're given by the governing bodies. Playing games would be easier to do, more fun to do, and more effective in the long run. I think we understand that. I really struggle with that balance at minor hockey of free play. I think it would work totally with all the constraints you can imagine. I like what you're saying, and I think the reason I wanted to get Richard on, we use his book as sort of how a guy who's a hockey guy that can write books in novels is pretty amazing. But I like the thread we're on, and Richard, if you don't mind, I'm going to bring in. I'm going to ask Rick Puttock. Rick and I had coffee yesterday. We reviewed. I gave him a copy of Belfry's new book, Offensive Hockey. And he does exactly what you're saying, but in a structured way. He explains formations in the offensive zone. He said there's two triangles. There's a low triangle with the puck with 3 forwards spaced in a triangle in the lower half of the rink. There's a second triangle with the 2D and the high forward. And he said as the D come down and the forward goes up, the D can engage, but he teaches it triangles. And so now you get the interchanging flow of those players being comfortable at the NHL level doing that. And I think kids can do it sooner than later. But just his idea of, yesterday when I talked to Rick about it, Rick had actually read that part of his book before. That's what I mean about, okay, there's a degree of structural understanding here, visual imagery that you can take into the game. So, Rick, I just wonder if you would comment, just listening to everything, and I'd love to hear your point of view.
I'm not sure I can do justice to it, Wally, the way you think, but like I at this point, I've not been a big user of small area games. My approach over the last 3 years of my active coaching, has been to break down all of the structural parts of the game, the power play formations, the PK formations, the defensive zone coverage, the attack options, build them all into drills, but don't mandate that they use any one of them in any particular situation, because I believe they're all interchangeable in all zones. The principles of support and so on are all interconnected, irregardless where you are on the ice. And then my drill exercises, when we're not working in stations on skill development, are exercises where, for instance, on the breakout, you'll set it up where a puck will be dumped, the D will go back and retrieve, a support will come down, they'll break out, they'll go down the rink, they'll take a shot on goal, the D gaps up and stays with the play, the forward would take a new puck and come back one-on-one. Basically, it's a game within the game, and it incorporates all of the parts, but it's not labeled as a breakout, it's not labeled as an attack, it's just, this is the game as we play it, these are the things you need to watch for, and the way you can react one way or the other to the way things are going on. And then when the games start, the competitive games, the players just adapt these things into their play. It's in my opinion, it's creating a different habit pattern for them, so that they just instinctively go to these things when they're under the pressures of the game. And I've had good success with it, and I plan to continue with the team I'm working with this year.
Richard, I'd love to hear your comments, because this is what I'm talking about. Rick expressed it. We're from the old school, whole teaching of skill, drill adaptation, creating your own drills to serve a purpose. So, Richard, what do you think now, combining everyone's thoughts?
Well, as they say, that's a deep thought. The whole idea of, I mean, I'm from that school as well. I am of an age where you know, breaking it down and breakouts and so on. But looking at the guys that I've got right now, as because that's my most immediate term of reference, compared to, you know, teams I coached 15, 20 years ago, which is just a blur now. A breakout begins with a puck recovery. As I put in the note in the chat, get it, keep it, you got to get the puck first. So, you know, you got to be able to get the puck, then you got to make a decision on what you're going to do with it. Pattern stuff at the minor hockey level, you know, for the vast majority of kids playing and coaches working with players under the age of 14, 15 is not really a consistent part of the game. Like I saw an article recently about doing 3-on-2s and the different kinds of ways to do 3-on-2s. And, you know, I've asked coaches in clinics, how many times do you have a 2-on-1? A bona fide 2-on-1 in a game. You know, I asked a coach just last night about, what did I ask him now? Was it about 2-on-1s or 3-on-2s? I think it was 3-on-2s, because he was talking to me about how we wanted to do something in his practice. They were 12-year-olds. So they were tier 2, tier 3, tier 2. And how many, you know, he was doing a 3-on-2 drill. And he was pretty proud of the drill. I said, okay, well, how many 3-on-2s do you get in a game? Oh, he goes, I don't know, maybe 2 or 3. So you're spending 15 minutes in your practice on something that happens 2 or 3 times in a game. The kids, there's too many decisions for the kids to make. Let's break it down. 2-on-1, 1-on-1, 2-on-1, small space. What kind of decisions do they need to make? What are your priorities? What are their priorities?
Excellent, Richard. Next week, I'm hoping Daryl Belfry will be on. I'm just holding up his book, and I've earmarked pages. He's talking about, we're talking about at another level. Transition is the game within a game, and being able to think ahead. He talks about in the offensive zone, being in good position defensively with the puck, anticipating what's happening. So his book is certainly something to take the, what I call the teaching aspect, although it isn't because they're playing, but because of his languaging, they're seeing more possibilities to their play. And I think that may be the line that Richard and I and Daryl's definitely taken it to another level. I was always confused. I just thought he was having a competitive, deliberate start to a game situation that they did over and over again. But reading his second book, it's beginning to make more sense to me and taking it to another level. So, Dean, I wonder if you're on and whether you've got anything to add, and get back to John and Tom. You guys are brilliant. I'd just like to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I guess I've been kind of listening in here. I've had to multitask this morning. I've got to go here soon. I've got an appointment. I think what Richard said, you know, what's the relevance of practice to the game? And one of the big things that struck me early on when I started at Hockey Canada, late 80s, early 90s, was when Urka, I think, was the first guy to come over on the coaching exchange, and he stayed for a year working with Hockey Canada. And then, the Czech fellow, Tom, who was the Czech fellow who was here after Richard? Somebody will know his name. Wally, somebody.
Slava Leonard.
Slava, right? Slava. So Slava came over and replaced, didn't replace Urka, but took the role. And then Slava ended up staying on for a couple of years as an assistant with the Flames. So
he worked with UFC too 1 year, because he was with us when I was with Willie.
Yeah, he was good. He got out in the community there and was trying to help out. And I think the big thing with those guys was the what I learned from them was the importance of transition. And I think Richard held up the one manual there, the green one. I think that was Slava's. I think Urka's was the blue one. Like I was a guy who put all that stuff together for Hockey Canada, and so it was very fascinating to work with those two guys on their approaches. And a couple of things that really came to mind was Urka was always about one puck. He was always saying, only use one puck. That's all you need in practice. Got to mimic the game. If you're not mimicking the game, you're wasting your time. And I think the other thing was the intentionality of practice and understanding how often things occur in practice. So what Richard was saying is when he asked the coach how many times does a 3-on-2 happen, versus whatever, it's knowing what are the most commonly occurring elements in a game, and then trying to structure your practice to reflect those commonly occurring opportunities and practice them as competitively and realistically as you can to mimic the amount of time that typically it'll happen in your level, your league, your play, because that's ultimately then going to be the most efficient and effective use of your practice. So I guess that would be my contribution to the conversation.
Yeah, Erica brought me to Finland, I think 3 summers to run. I was a head instructor of their national hockey school in Viramäki. And, it was a lot of the stuff was his stuff. I was doing the transition games. So that's why he brought me there.
Okay, all of us understand what you're saying, Dean. I'm not sure average coaches are going to appreciate it and understand the nuances, but I'm going to try to bring a practical bent to what everybody's saying. When you say, it's only one puck, well, that's the opinion. Yeah, the game is one puck. Richard mentioned 3 pucks. And then you got 2, and then you got 1. Well, there's thinking involved, which might happen in a game, which is going to help them in a game. So they're both right. And I think that's the most important thing. I'm going to use an example here of games. You fight for a puck, you battle. And I see some young players not competing, not working hard. So I have a drill. 1 bull in the ring, 1 with a puck, 1 without. You can have a little football pushing dummy, and you try to drive them out or make them lose the puck. It's a battle. Oh, what's it got to do with hockey? Well, you've got to be strong on your skates. You've got to be evasive with your skating. You've got to make contact. So that's what I mean about a deliberate repetition of a competitive battle drill. And as Dave King did years ago, he taught progressively puck protection, free puck races, and those things are important. But coaches as a whole aren't versed at doing that. And that's the balance that I struggle with. And I find if I can't get coaches to do the teaching things, the game things, the simpler the better, the more they're able to imply constraints, introduce constraints. They may not interpret their purpose, but just playing simple games, it's going to work. John, any comments? We'd sort of interrupt you when you were talking there, but I'm just trying to come back to the confusion I face with coaches, mentoring coaches. Tom's the game-like guy that teaches, and the other coaches are different at his level. They're all good, excellent in their own way. The bottom line in assessment and evaluating them is, are the kids having fun? Do the kids want to come back to the rink?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Are they getting results? Because the results and the outcome, in the end, are a product of your coaching and your influence and motivation to teach the tactical play involved. Go ahead, John.
Well, yeah. Well, this is, again, I will use that word every time, fascinating, because after all this year, and we have the opportunity to share our way of thinking in coaching, And I will say one thing. So when I mentioned Bobby Orr, I just want to sort of clarify this, Wally. I will mention Pele or the older players who learn their craft in the street, in shinny hockey, playing in the ponds or in the lakes, because I did that too when I learned hockey. And I think what I was trying to say is, me as a coach, how I can get the best out of a player and how I can transform these youth players and free their minds so they can be as great as the best we have had in the past or right now. We mentioned the NHL. I will say we get the best, and the kids will look into those role models to play the game. My question becomes this every time to coaches: what are we doing to help these kids to achieve that? So this is where the two worlds of traditional coaching and what I will say this more holistic approach to coaching, playing games, goes. So I want to clarify one thing here. When, as Richard said, I do coach games. I only use games. I've done it for the last 30 years. But I think, as Dean say, you have to make a choice. How exactly are you going to manage that? And when I say games, 1 versus 1 is a game for me. 2 versus 1 is a game for me. 2 versus 2 is a game for me. 3 versus 2, 3 versus 3, 4 versus 3 in hockey will stop at 5 versus 5. They all games. It's how we promote this approach. Rick said that he used drills. Great. But at the end of the day, if you do 1 versus 1 in a drill situation, it becomes a game. Now, my approach is, okay, this is the challenge you have on 1 versus 1. Wally, you just mentioned. For me, it's a battle. It's a competition. It's a way of doing it. And if you think about repetition, you have to be realistic. You have to have 2 nets or 1 net, 1 direction where they can fight and find a solution to resolve that equation of 1 versus 1. And if you do it for 8 minutes, in my book, it doesn't work. So you have to do it at least 20 minutes. All the kids involved, 30 minutes. That's how I divide my training sometimes. And you talk, I think we mentioned anticipation here. The game is about anticipation in transition. It's about transition. You have to anticipate this transition. That's what you need to teach the kids. You have to get them going and real game setup time so they can learn to make this transition. They can see them coming to them and they can react to it. Principles of offense at any level are almost the same. In soccer, hockey, they are similar. They are the same. Nothing changed. We talk about triangles. Wally, you mentioned triangles. It's the same everywhere. They all the same. So when we approach the game, everybody's experience, as you have and everybody have here, you decide what to do. I will preach what I do because that's what it had worked for me for many years. And I've seen it with my kids and many of the kids I coach over the years. They have become great players, very good players, playing at national level, playing at World Cups. So which approach is the best? We can debate all day and everybody will have their 2 cents on it. But I think, just to make clear, the purpose of what you do have to be clear and you have to be able to set it up. And if it works, you know, great. I mean, that's what you do. For me, if I, like I say, we can talk about breakouts in hockey. We talk about 1 versus 1, possession, movement as a group, collectively moving as a group. How you do that? Well, I do have games for that. I have designed over the years a lot of stuff that I believe work, and the kids love it. And they do understand the concepts of transition, of movement as a collective group. And that's what I think is the key for me, is how you learn these things, how you teach them, how you approach them. You can break it down in many pieces. That's okay. Do they need to know? Maybe not. I think you need to experiment with all these, and then you and everyone have done that. So I think with time you refine your craft, your coaching, and then you start going that way. So I've been working on this for, like I say, in both in hockey and soccer for the last almost 35 years. So yeah, that's an approach, like everyone. So I think hope one day we can do a clinic together and all together go to a nice rink and get, I don't know, everyone, 60 kids, and let's go work and let's go put all in place and design things. I think that's the fascinating thing. It's always a quest.
John, we've all been working on things for as long as you. My concern is the coaches who are just maybe in their fifth year of coaching, and they might be in their seventh or 10th year of coaching, and they still don't understand the value of competitive games, varied numbers to teach. So my concern with the coaches, and I may be generalizing here, but I would rather they played varieties of games, whole length, half ice, end zone, corners, numbered numerical variations, kept score. The game will teach. And that's what I'm going to try to do at the U13 level, Tom. I'm watching these stations and these drill repetitions, and there is going to be progress, but they just want to play, and they will think because they're thinking on their own. I think we have to know more about the thinking process than we do about the teaching process. Just beginning to understand how they think and figure things out. Richard, go ahead.
Thanks. I mentioned earlier about leadership, and as an illustration of the issue we're facing. So, this lofty group of hockey brains here with 10,000 years of experience, we're so far removed from the average coach with 4 years experience or 8 years experience. So how do we get our messages to them? Last night, I'm leaving the rink.
I'm losing, Richard.
I beg your pardon?
You got cut out quite a few times that first.
Oh, can you hear me now?
I hear
that, yeah.
Okay. So I'm leaving the rink last night. A guy is coming out that I've known for a few years. He took his HP, not this past year, summer, but the summer before. So 2022. He said the very first thing that the person in charge of the HP said to the gathered throngs, 70% of you are not going to pass. So he came to me yesterday as I'm going in the rink. He's coming outside. He says, "Richard, you've done all this. You've been through this. What kind of a message does it send when they're telling us from the outset that 70% of us are not going to pass?" And then he says, I'm writing my answers to the HP questions. It's going to be 150 pages long. So I said, well, Tom, that's not his real name. Tom, why do you make it 150 pages long? It's not a doctoral dissertation. Call me and we'll whittle it down to something usable for your 13-year-olds. He's coaching 13-year-olds AAA or 14-year-olds AAA. So he says, I was really upset by that. I went, I don't have a chance of passing? Like 70% are not going to pass? And he says he talked to another guy who was at it this past summer. They got the same message. Well, what's the point? I don't get it. I didn't get it. So,
Richard, I question the course conductor and their knowledge and their ability to inspire coaches to think and do things uniquely, differently, and better. And
Well,
that's what's happened. It's become a canned process with deliberate repetition and no thinking. And back in the day, Richard, I don't know what you did with your HP1. Mine was over 100 pages long. And all it was a chance to collate everything I knew about the game and have it on a file. So it was a review of my library of information that was subconsciously stored. I put it to paper. That made it a good exercise. And most of the people I know, like Dale Henwood and those guys that wrote the test in those times, I'm sure when you wrote it, Richard, yours was 100 pages long. But today we understand as an exercise at that point in their career, they have to gather everything they know, extrapolate it. They have a library, they have it on file. They're starting to learn.
I think mine was only about 90 pages. I'm sorry, I fell short, but that was in the old level 5 days.
Yes.
But what I mean, the requirements for everything now is different. You know, university, high school, graduate, it's all the requirements are different. I'm not questioning whether or not something should be different. I'm just saying that, come on, guys, you've been sending the same message for 15, 18 years. You know, do you not look in the mirror and ask yourself, why do we have a 70% failure rate? You know, if you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you always got.
Rick, any comments? Can you get us on some kind of a track again?
Well, one thought that I've had just listening here, Wally. One of the first things I do with any new group that I take on is I do an assessment of just where they're at in terms of their knowledge and their experience. What do they really know about the game? And a good example is that you brought up Dave King teaching puck protection in stages. You hear coaches all the time, protect the puck, protect the puck. Do they actually know that the player knows what they mean by that? They may have some impression of it, but until you go back and explain it all and give everybody the benefit of the basics, it's just words. And anytime I have done that exercise, and it's not only related to puck protection, but virtually all of the skills, passing right down to, I don't care what group it is I've worked with, even at the midget AAA level, I've had them lined up in pairs and going through the exercise just to understand what the mechanics are, what the expectation is, how you go about it to get the best result. And then I can confidently remind them for the rest of the time I have with them that you're not doing it correctly, you can do it better, and so on and so forth. But give them the benefit of what your expectation is in all of these areas. I don't see a lot of coaches doing that. Any group that I've done it with, once we go through the exercise, Wally, you talked about battle drills. Okay, so how to use your body, how to use your knees, how to use your core strength versus your arm and shoulder strength. All of these things get broken down, they get explained, they get an opportunity to experience it, and lo and behold, the group as a whole and individuals to varying degrees suddenly become a lot better at things that you thought they knew. We made an assumption because they're at midget or U18 or U15 that they've done all these things along the way. And Wally, I can recall you making some comments over the time here about guys in HP1 when you challenge them on this. Well, they should know this by now. Well, until we as coaches dealing with that group directly know what they know, we can't assume anything. So we need to go back and determine with each group we work with, what is their base? What do they know? Get everybody on a common page, a common understanding.
That's a great point, Rick. Everything you said is bang on. And we are forgetting one really key thing here, that under the current structure of certification, and here we are digressing into another realm, but under the current structure of certification, you enter the certification level at the level you are coaching. You need to have no other coach training or education. If you're coaching a junior A team and you're 26 years old, you take the HP to coach junior A, and you've never taken a coaching clinic in your life. So they don't know what they don't, all they know is what they did when they were 18, right? If you're coaching a competitive hockey team in Canada, U15A, AA, you need to have had no other coach training, certification, or education before jumping into that development one certification and the one practice evaluation that they do. So when they eliminated the graduated licensing, I guess we could call it, we in HEO were the last branch in Canada to have it, where you had to go from level to level to level, kind of like high school to, BA to grad and so on. They eliminated that because they felt that coaches didn't want to sit through, 8 hours of instruction on basic stuff in their coaching junior A, instead of addressing what the needs were of coaches, a junior A or AAA. So what you have now, like the guy Tom I bumped into last night, he's coaching 13-year-olds. He's writing the same exam as the junior A guys who are, it's their full-time job. Makes no sense. Nobody's questioned it.
Dean, anything else? John?
Well, I just wanted to veer completely off the railroad tracks and give Richard's new book a shout out. I was just typing something into the chat box because I've got to leave. But maybe Richard can come on and just talk a little bit about it after. But I bought it for my Kindle, and the same night that I bought it, I read it cover to cover. Took a few hours. It was very good. It's a young Canadian fellow who was coaching junior A, and his dad was working overseas and died under mysterious circumstances. And this fellow takes a pro coaching job in Paris. And of course, Richard is coached over there. And so it was really interesting to read the book because he's describing a lot of the stuff that he saw back around 1980 Paris. So a very readable book. There's actually, even though it's a hockey excuse of a book, as a plot or a context, there's very little hockey in it. It's all about this young fellow trying to figure out what exactly happened to his dad, and there's lots of twists and turns and intrigue and mystery. And I told Richard, I said, he better get working on the sequel because I can't wait for that one. And it only took him about 30 years to get this one done. So, he's got to get moving. He's got to get that shortened up for the next one. Anyway, very good book, Richard. And I hope that the guys here have maybe check it out and help pad your retirement fund there when they go purchase it on Kindle for, I think it was $10. So well done, Richard.
I'll send you that $50 tip. Thanks a lot for the plug.
You're welcome.
Richard, I have a question. How did you get into writing? And then how did you get into writing this book, given what you're doing? Go ahead.
Well, I'm a writer. I mean, this is nothing new. If you were to look at my bio, I've been writing since I was 18, but I'd never written a novel. I've done short fiction, short stories, plays that have all been published, a couple of awards along the way, but a lot of nonfiction, newspapers, magazines. Like I've been doing this my whole life. The genesis of the story is anybody who's been overseas, anybody who's been in Europe, particularly Western Europe, you can't escape seeing references to the war, one war or the other. They've lived through wars. We haven't over here, except in the U.S. perhaps. But even then, that's 160 years ago. So having sort of a fertile imagination as a writer, I took things I'd read about, things I'd heard, things I'd seen, and figured what if. And one of the things that has always fascinated me as a writer has been the roles that the so-called little people or unknown people played in important events. There was a short story written a number of years ago, and I can't remember who wrote it, but I remember teaching it in school. It was called The Execution of Private Slovak. And it was about a First World War Canadian soldier who was executed for desertion during the First World War, because that's what they did then. And the story is very interesting. It talks about the private and what went on. But what I found curious was, what if you were one of the soldiers in the execution team? What was it like for you? And that spurred me on to do a short story and a play called The Cellar, which is about the execution of the Romanov family in 1918. And the story is about the last surviving member of the execution team. What was it like for that person to have lived through that experience, to kill 11 people in cold blood in this little room in Russia? So, looking at this particular story, it's not about the big names, although there are a couple of big names that are thrown out. It's about stuff that went on behind the scenes. And World War II is a treasure trove of stories, as we've seen with movies and whatnot, but they're all on a larger landscape. So I wanted to bring the story into a very small, narrow experience for certain people. It turns out that my buddy Ted, the co-author, he's the principal of an international school in Seoul in South Korea. We taught together at Ashbury College in Ottawa in the 80s. And he just finished his doctorate in English on C.S. Lewis, The Lion, the Witch, and the Cupboard, Wardrobe, whatever. So Ted finally, was working on that for years, and we had sat side by side putting this story together. This was over 30 years ago, and then we let it sit. Then we sent it to publishers and didn't hear anything and let it sit. And came back to it 2 years ago. Didn't get any traction from that. And I was never happy with the fact that the original version was first person. I always felt that a third person omniscient narrator seemed to be a better way to tell this story. So in May, we got together online and rewrote the story as third person, and here we are. So that's it.
Richard, I'm not tech savvy. Is the very first time you shared the links, I attempted to buy it and get it. I don't think I've ever been able to get anything on Kindle, so I may call Dean and get some help at walking me through the purchase process.
Well, just go to Amazon and click books. You can buy the paperback version. It's $19.95.
Okay. I'll do that.
Yeah.
But I don't know if you know, Richard. I think every one of us has our own personal stories. When I went to University of Saskatchewan, my father and mother came from the Ukraine to escape the Stalin regime. And of course, I was born in 1945, and the Second World War was a huge thing. My dad didn't join the service. He was a bit of a pacifist, but I took a special interest in war and war causation. And in my education degree, that was my major. So I did teach some history. I was very curious about how could people kill each other over anything, and how do countries get drawn into wars? And it's been one of the most intriguing parts of my life, wondering about why are we so unstable as a country, as a community, and as a world in terms of the problems that are going on? And
Well, in my case, my dad was a war veteran, and he was born 1920. So people of that. I mean, some of us here are over the age of 50, give or take, and our parents either were spectators to or involved in. In my dad's case, he was in the RCAF and the RAF, and some harrowing stories that he didn't give me in detail, but that was also an inspiration to what makes a 19-year-old. And he was living in Montreal. We're from Montreal, and Rick, you understand Outremont, I'm sure. They lived in Outremont, and a bunch of guys get together. Hey, there's a big thing going on overseas, and the Germans, and let's join up. And my dad was going for his welding license, decided to join the Air Force. There's even a story about that. So that all is that very inspiring, because I'm looking at myself here now and my kids and my grandchildren growing up in North America or in Canada, having never experienced anything like this, and will never experience anything like this, I hope, with the exception of joining the military and going overseas. My mother threatened to break my ankles if I ever decided to join the military. Which of course would slow me down in hockey even slower than I already was. So the inspiration comes from a number of different sources. I think if you were to talk to anybody who's written anything of any substance, fictional stuff, the inspiration comes from, various places. And the characters in the book are composites. A couple of them are closer to not being a composite, but for the most part, the characters are composites of various people. And the time period was chosen very deliberately. It's set in 1980, but the reason for that is, there are a few reasons for that. One is because it deals with collaboration in France during and post-war, the people who were the principals in collaboration would be in their 50s, which is still young enough to be vibrant and active and want to exert revenge or be involved in something. Once they get, if I'd set the story in the year 2000, it's 55 years after the end of the war, and people are kind of going, nah, forget it, move on. The other part of it was that 1980 was just before the trial of a guy named Klaus Barbie, who was called the Butcher of Lyon, France. And I didn't want it to overlap with that story, because that's a very different kind of awful story about collaboration and, sending children to concentration camps. I didn't want to get into that. Those stories have all been told, and very well. And I didn't want to get into the Holocaust and that kind of stuff. I felt that was, pardon the pun, a bridge too far for what I wanted to, the story we wanted to tell.
Richard, I'm really happy. I've got about 10 minutes that I'm going to edit out to promote your book. I know Tom has stories. I have other stories related to war, and I think I'm excited enough now to read your fictional book and move forward with it. And I'm going to, hopefully Jordan is still on, because Jordan writes a weekly blog at his high school, and he may not be on, but I'm just going to ask Jordan, if you're on, can you let us know? Good. Jordan, I think you're quite a bit younger than me. And I was born in 45, and I don't know your birth year and your experience and knowledge of war, but I know that you write a weekly blog for your teachers, and many of us are educators. As if you're a coach, you're an educator, I think. But I wonder if you could talk about the blog and eventually segue it into. I've talked about you earlier, Jordan, and your ability to teach. And I referred to the breakout drill that you did with Wes's team, combining running a U13 practice with your U18s. So, Jordan, go ahead. I don't know what your thoughts of the war are, and then how you got to writing a blog on a weekly school basis as a principal of an elementary school.
Well, Wally, thanks. I've been listening in and multitasking. It's been a little bit of a challenge getting everything going. We have just under 900 students, K to 6, in 3 different programs, French immersion, English, and Christian program. And there seem to be continuing to come in daily, even though we're in week 2 now. People coming in daily wanting to register. So it's been a busy startup. Yeah, that's a whole lot you guys have been talking about, and I've been jotting a few notes here that, of course, I'll be picking brains a little bit later on, Wally, on a side note with the coaching side of things. I know Tom's talking about reducing players. We're finally just getting to our numbers in camp. We had our draft last night. How it works with U18 AA in Calgary is that make 2 teams out of 1 camp, and so we had the draft, and that's always exciting, and made those phone calls home to players, and they're excited to keep going. And unfortunately, you have to temper their enthusiasm by saying, but we're not to roster yet. So that part's going on. So the hockey side is exciting. The startup for school is exciting. And it's really interesting, Richard, what your background in talking about this. In my past life in education, I started out as a high school English teacher before going to the dark side and becoming a principal. It's been, I'm in my 20th year as a high school, or well, not high school. I've been everything, K to 12, high school, and now elementary administrator. And it's been a great journey, and I'm really, really pleased to be introduced to you and some of your writing. I definitely will pick some of it up and go through it. What Wally's talking about is every Friday I write a message to my staff, and it goes back to a piece that was stolen from an executive that he called it Friday Forward is what it was called. Glazier was the guy that wrote it, and he was a CEO, and he talked about the importance of vulnerability and using Fridays, because the whole mentality with Friday is TGIF, and that we're sliding into the weekend. And he said that with a corporation, Friday is just as important as a Monday, or Friday is just as important as a Wednesday. So why do we start allowing our brains and ourselves to start sliding out of work and into the weekend? So he started doing it as a little bit of a way of trying to inspire his workers, or looking at the day differently. So what I do with it is it's Friday thoughts, and I coined it with 40 Fridays because there's 40 Fridays in a school year. And so what I do is it could be any topic that's pertinent to what's going on, or it might be just absolutely totally something else. But it's meant to spark people thinking on a Friday morning. I send it out every Friday morning. Some staff read it Friday morning. Some read it later on, save it for the weekend. Some don't read it at all, and that's okay. That's part of it too, is that it's a weekly email, and they can do whatever they want with it. Some forward it on. I have some other people who have requested to be a part of the mailing list, and I've had interactions with people I had no idea who they were, because someone had forwarded it on to them. And so some of the topics have been anything from education related to, well, me kind of coming to terms with my white male privilege that I didn't really think was a thing, because I guess I'm white and male. But all sorts of things like that. And some have come from interactions with students, some have come from interactions with players, some have come from interactions with anything. And it's just a way of us being reflective practitioners in our lives. And I think that, of course, that comes with age, because when you're young, you're too busy living the moment to worry about consequences. And sometimes I still get caught up in that and just enjoy life for the living and that piece. Don't overthink things too much, but because sometimes it's just fun to see how things work out. But it's been a great thing that I've been doing for myself personally for it's been nearly 3 years now, and but the dividends I'm seeing from it is that I've become more approachable to some staff because of the role I play and on a big staff. And it's sparked some really amazing conversations with some people that I probably wouldn't have had otherwise. So I appreciate that opportunity to do that. My passion, two passions collide with education and hockey through coaching. And it's something that, as I said, we're on the cusp of the start of a new school year and the cusp of a new season. So these are exciting times. Sorry, you're muted, Wally.
Jordan often makes references to his hockey in his blogs. They're very short, easy reads. I make a point of reading them on Fridays, and then I share them with a group of retired teachers, and I've shared them with the Sharks because the messages as an educator are the same. And of course, the biggest message of the Sharks is being a lifelong learner. And Jordan certainly is that person. So, Jordan, I just wanted to share with you, and we're sort of getting back on the hockey trail here, Richard, coming full circle to our discussions. Jordan coaches the U18 AA girls team. And Tom, I've watched the under 18 AAA team play a game against Okotoks, and regardless of my concerns at the U13 level and what the U15s are doing and could do better or differently, the performance of the under 18 AAA team was mind-boggling for me. They're doing everything I hoped for. They're looking, they're managing the puck, all the evasive team tactics, engagement in the play, interchange of positions. I think everybody has to get out and watch the AAA team because we're definitely preparing athletes to think the game better, play the game better. When they do get to that level and perform like that, it's a product of what they've done from that point on. I know one thing I want to mention, Jordan, the relationship that Kyle has with you and Ben, the U18 coaches. It's a synergistic kind of exchange of ideas, and you're all there developing the girls the right way to move forward and get better. And it's a real payoff that I can see going on, which I believe is an association that you want to see. And I'm really glad just to be a part of observing it and taking advantage of the expertise of the people that have been there and done that and are still trying to do it, like you, Richard, and Tom, and Rick, all of us, in fact. So, Jordan, I did talk about, you might have been on, I really think the U13 coaches would benefit the players more by allowing them to just play varieties of games, numerical, changing the numbers and changing the space, than trying to run the canned deliberate drills that are provided by Researching Drills or Hockey Canada's package. The kids would progress as much or more than through the deliberate practice that isn't necessarily accomplishing that much. It's just repetition, 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 and not necessarily proper repetition to do things correctly. So, my point is, Richard, everything you're doing and Tom's doing, we have to do more of at the U13 level. More decision making at practice, more small area games, more tactical implications of those small area games to benefit the level you're at. Jordan, have you got any thoughts on that? Because you know where I'm coming from, and Tom and Richard are coming from. What's your take on playing more small area competitive games and designing them to accomplish a purpose?
Well, Wally, I just, I'm going to actually go back to something that John was briefly talking about when he was talking about Bobby Orr and Pele and talking about them playing scrimmage or just playing for the fun of it as children. And so that part has kind of disappeared in our society because we have structured so much for our youth. And it was actually kind of interesting that when we had the lockdown or the shutdowns due to COVID, that there were more kids on the ice out on the lake of Chestermere here that winter than I'd ever seen prior and ever seen since. It would have been an interesting study if a person was actually thinking about it to see what that did for development of that age group of kids. Yeah, I really like small area games, use lots of them, and I really love the idea of constraints that Tom uses probably more than any that I've seen or heard of, and using the game to teach that way. The thing that you talked about earlier with the simulated breakout game that I kind of used with Wes's team there. That one was something that I stole from Thomas Pacina that he used with the Czechia national women's team there prior to the Olympics. And it is basically a game piece, and you could turn that into a small area game. I have for simulating breakouts, and actually on the flip side of it, simulating forecheck because you can get the other group that they gain points by being undernumbered and getting the puck back. So yeah, I think that there's room for both. I get what Richard's talking about with all the toys on the ice, because it seemed like I was watching at the Alberta Challenge. There were some minor pro guys out on the ice prior to one of the ice sessions, and they were already training in the summer, and the person had the danglers out there that were the knockoff of the Power Edge Pro stuff, and just kind of laughing in saying that I don't know how many times those guys are going to run into a piece of plastic out on the ice, but they'll run into each other quite a bit. So when you had that level of competition, they probably would have been better off just playing a smaller game against each other. And that I do get the piece that the kids are going to practice individual skills and they need to individually, but they also need to be able to apply it in games and think and all those things. So yeah, there's time for blend, but again, going back to what you said right off the top, the important piece of knowing what to teach and how to teach, because not every person on the ice surface is going to need the exact same thing. We have to be able to differentiate that learning for each of those players and understand our players as individuals too.
Richard, I'm glad you put your hand up because I was thinking of you. It's a great time for you to intervene.
Well, I guess everybody's heard of Adam Graves. Remember the great NHLer? And he runs, keeping in mind he's dealing with pros, he runs instructional stuff in Florida and somewhere else, I can't remember where. And he has said, get rid of the toys, all of them. So that's his opinion. Okay, fine. There's a key aspect to, and we're talking about in season, not summer, not spring, in season. And I was a skills guy. I taught the skating and all that other stuff for years and years and years, never in season. When you look at the research that's going on around the world, especially in Europe, but in England and Australia and Finland and Sweden, extensive studies, dozens and dozens and dozens of studies on skill acquisition, ecological approaches, dynamics, and so forth. Read the literature, read the books. Rob Gray in the US is a key one at Arizona State University. He's from Toronto, as a matter of fact. Former goalie. He was on my podcast. There is not one study in any sport that shows that the linear approach and using the toys is actually beneficial. And in studies that are comparing the approaches, particularly in volleyball, basketball, and rugby, which are the ones that I've read, because hockey has not yet done it. The comparison also shows that the non-linear approach, if you want to call it game-like, let's call it game-like, and I agree that a 1 against 1 is a game. 2 against 1 is a game. It doesn't, the terminology is, it doesn't matter what you call it. If you feel you want to call it a game because that's what the players will cotton to, then that's fine. But the research on the benefits of these things, on the importance of scanning that comes across in using small area games, even to a guy named, oh God, now what's his name? Oh, geez. I think he's Dutch. Axum. Was it Callum Axum or something? Who did his PhD on rondos in soccer. Rondos for
Marius Axum.
That's the one. That's the one. Marius Axum. Rondos in soccer are, you have, it's like monkey in the middle, 6 players, 8 players around in a circle with one trying to stop the ball. He did a research study on that and found it was pretty much useless. And he said, soccer coaches should never be doing that. Now, it's even harder in soccer than in hockey. If you have 5 players with a ball, your leg can only extend so far to stop the ball. You have no chance of touching the ball. At least in hockey, you can use your stick. So monkey in the middle in hockey is a lot more effective than a rondo in soccer. The question is how you use it, what skills are you trying to get the kids to apply. So he said rondos, the research was very clear, rondos are a waste of time because the players are not scanning, they're not doing anything that's game-like. Again, remember, we're talking about practice. I sound like, what's his name, the basketball players. Remember a few years ago, we talking about practice? Are we talking about practice? Do you remember that interview? What was the guy's name? Great player. We talking about practice? Yeah, we're talking about 2 practices a week, 3 practices a week. That's why when I did my Sept presentation, I had all the attributions there. All the statements came from somewhere. It's not just my opinion. I'm the practitioner. I take all the research that everybody's master's degrees were based on, and I've tried to put it together and go, why are you putting pylons out there? Like I watched a guy last night with the players doing the 5 circles, forward to backward, backward to forward, forward to, for 10 minutes. Okay, why? Aren't there other things you could do to get your players to do transition skating by having them play a game? Maybe telling them you're going to play this game and every 2 seconds you go from forward to backward. I used to do that all the time when I was teaching skating with little kids. Okay, we'd have a free flow. I called it a chaos drill inside the blue line, inside center ice. You go every which way. Every 2 seconds you go from forward to backward. Count to yourself. I'm not calling it out. You can all count to 2 or 4. So the research has to be the foundation of how we teach, how we coach, and how we know skills are acquired. In the same way, Jordan, you're a principal. I've been that route while I was a VP. I was lower. I was way down the ladder. But a lot of what we do in education is based on research. You know, how to teach reading, how to teach. Here in Ontario, they're bringing back cursive writing. You know, how we teach math. That's all based on research. It's not because some teacher said, let's do it this way. So hockey has to take that approach. We have to take a more educational approach. Are they going to listen to John the Columbian? No. Why should they? Are they going to listen to me? No. Why should they? But as soon as we have people who are going, whoa, time out here. What is the research telling us? So all the guys in the USA Hockey, Bob Mancini and Roger Grillo and all these people, fantastic hockey people, all their content is based on research. There was a great study by Amanda Visek in the States on fun and the elements that kids require or the kids react to make it fun. That's based on quite an intensive study. I read it on the various components of what, and girls and boys of every age, they all agree that fun is made up of the following things. So if we follow that research, we'll be on the right track. So endeth the lesson. I'll stop now.
This plan.
I'm really pleased with today's session. I know we used your book to get into it, and we didn't get into it till about the 50-minute mark. But now we're sort of back on the coaching track, and I've earmarked those pages, those minutes, 125 to 130, where what you've said, the science of playing games and how it's more effective, the research on it. And I am trying to edit parts to convince my U13 coaches who are trying to coach the best they can in the way they know and trying to get them to think differently and try different things without imposing on them, without making them feel uncomfortable. I know at the U15 level, I totally make them feel uncomfortable, with the exception of Tom, who I can converse with before, during, and after games, and his staff, because they know me over many years. The other two staffs are used to doing things their way, and it's well done in the old deliberate fashion manner. And hopefully we can get them to think and open their eyes and get in the water and experiment a little bit with their swimming or coaching strokes. But right now, my U13 level and all of this knowledge of how to teach, Richard, back in our era, and this may have been a problem, but back in our era, we took biomechanical principles. We broke down skills.
Yeah.
And we applied those scientific principles to be able to teach forward stride, stability, strength on skates, backward striding, pivoting. Scientifically, we were able to use this whole part, whole method. Do we not do that anymore, or should we forget about it? Because when they took those elements out of the curriculum in Hockey Canada, and they went into a repetition, there's, to me, elements of execution of fundamental skills leading to individual tactical skills that can make the players so much more effective.
You know, our objective should not be really to change each other's minds. I mean, who am I to suggest to Tom or, Rick Puttick or yourself, Wally, well, you got to do this, you got to do that. We've been coaching for eons. We've had some successes. We are at the final push of our coaching. You know, we're keeping our hands in it. But the coaches who are in their first 10 years, those are the ones we're going to get to. There's no question, Wally. Like, I still have Gaston Marcotte's book. I taught with Gas in Montreal for years, summer hockey school. And Gas is, at one time, the Russians called him the top technician in the world. Okay. I had the benefit of being the only Anglo to English person in Quebec language to work with Gas for a number of years. We had to take all the elements of skating here, and there was a checklist in the summertime when we did the hockey school. Can a kid do this, like the 10 elements of a tight turn, a virage brusque? What are the elements of a tight turn? What are the elements of this? What are the elements of that? And it was all separate from their ability to play hockey. So when I was coaching my early years in Montreal, I would go, well, I'm going to be a technician. I'm going to teach them this. And I think my teams would have been far more successful had I just put that aside and taught them how to play. Let's play the game. You know, taking 15 minutes out of my practice to teach them how to do a tight turn, in retrospect, didn't make any sense. But now we have researchers who are actually looking at this stuff and going, yeah, this linear approach, whole part whole, whatever you want to call it, is not effective. It has a place, like it may have more immediate results. The game type approach takes longer. We need to be more patient, but we're not in hockey, especially in this country. We're not patient. Okay, I've got a kid on my group. He's 16 years old. He's about 5'4", 107 pounds, soaking wet. He flies in one direction. He can go like the wind on his forehand. He's a right shot on his forehand around everybody on the rink. You know how you've seen those guys like Connor McDavid circling the zone? He can do that on his forehand 3 or 4 times in a row. Cannot go to his backhand. So, if he can't go to his backhand, I can't ask who owns the problem from 10 years ago when he was, you know, a little guy. How do I fix it now? Am I going to take him on the ice and work on his turning to the right? Or am I going to create a game environment where I'm going to challenge the players? If you're going around somebody, you have to go to your right and then left, not left and then, or something. You know, I have to find some way around it. How do I fix that little problem to make him a more complete player? I'm not going to teach him tight turns. I'm not going to teach him driving, you know, to the right in practice. But yeah, this is what we used to do. I still have all these books from Scadia. Do you remember that, Wally? Or who? Rick Punick must remember. Scadia. I asked Gas once, where did that name come from? He said, him and La Riviere, Georges La Riviere, and Christian Pellichat, they got together. What do we call it? Skate, Scadia? I don't know. He made it up.
Well, this session is, I'm the whole part whole guy. You know, I've taken this job on wanting to run a drill for the coaches that would teach the skill that they could apply in a game. Tom took evasive tight turns in a simple way, and he just had them skate around the perimeter and tight turn on the whistle with a fake to the inside. That was it. The repetition of that and then encouraging to do it in a game resulted in it in a game. And Tom, I wonder if you could elaborate on some more examples of what you've done deliberately that's paid off and evident, gotten results in game performance.
Well, I think I'm getting an echo here. That should
Pardon me,
stop it.
Tom?
Yeah, sorry, I had my screen on too, and I'm not getting. But anyways, yeah, that was part of the warm up. Just skating around when they're doing some long strides to warm up, and then tight turn towards the boards and 3 or 5 hard strides, and then real 2 quick ones, and that went right in a game. What I found last year, that other deliberate practicing is from you, Wally, is defend a one-on-one with no stick. Because like I see, I have a few players that do this now in this new team I've got. They, they're going for the puck and the players on the inside, then they swing their stick to them for the puck, and most of the time they get it, but when they don't, they're heading towards the boards and the player with the puck is heading towards the net. So to maintain defensive side, I found that the effective thing is to defend with no stick and do the one-on-one, and then we'll play 3-on-3 and starting on the boards, players with the puck on the boards passing the puck, and then say go, and it's a 3-on-3, and the defenders do not have sticks. So that's deliberate practice, and I think that really translates both those things to, the whole idea of staying on defensive side, and your job isn't to get the puck, it's to stay defensive side and defend from there. So those are two examples.
And just related to that, Tom, working with Dave King and having to play the Russians, Soviets, we had to learn how to maintain D side. And Dave had one simple teaching point, toe cap square. I had a progression of snowplow and front foot stops and T starts, so you didn't overskate situations, that I think complemented the maintaining of D side. To me, they were worthwhile, but it was a national team that had so much practice time to do it in. And while it wasn't fun, they enjoyed the reaping of the benefit of the tactical skating. So that's what I struggle with this working with Dave King and his ability to progressively teach tactical skills that you can do in games. To me, it bridges the gap in gameplay. I'm questioning myself now in terms of whether I should even focus on it anymore at the U13 and U15 levels, or just let it be.
Great name for a song, though.
What's that?
It's a great name for a song.
Yeah.
Let it be. Let it
You
be.
can't expect players to know it.
What's that, Tom?
I've always had the thought that if you haven't dealt with at some point, whether in a drill or a game, or you can't expect you're going to know it. You have to assume that nobody knows anything when they go in, because it's like right now, 19 players. There's such a spectrum of what they know and what they don't know.
Yeah.
And I heard this word forecheck all the time. I had no idea what that meant. And then at some point, somebody, I don't know what, but they explained what a forecheck was. I said, "Oh, you mean chasing the puck? I've been doing that all the time." So, so that's the thing about terminology and this kind of stuff. I wasn't that bright of a kid.
Being an inveterate thief as opposed to an invertebrate thief. The terminology that I use, that I stole from soccer way back, was net side inside. And I've been teaching my players net side inside positioning forever. We've always had very good defensive. Now, net side inside is just one component, because they're net side inside. They're between the opposition and the puck. They take an inside position on the rink, but is the head on a swivel? What are they doing with their sticks? There's a lot of other pieces. So when I did the 3-on-3 last night between the blue lines with the joker behind the blue lines, I'm bouncing back and forth between the benches, and I'm asking the guys, so who on your team right now is net side inside when the other team has the puck? I mean, you only have one zone to play with. It's not hard. Where are you going? Where are you looking? At least if you're looking, you have a chance. So this is how you build in the team play ideas around the principle of net side inside.
Can you clarify net side inside for the listeners and me? Go ahead.
Okay, net side slash inside. And in fact, I put it on I did bring in dry erase sheets and I put it on the wall of the dressing room of reminders for the game. Stick on puck is always big for me. One guy said to me last night, would you prefer stick on puck or body on body? And he's a big kid. And I said, Austin, it depends on the situation, but the vast majority of time, stick on puck works best. It's less tiring, less dangerous, and more effective. Anyway, net side inside means when you're in a defensive posture and you're not role number 3, Tom, the guy around the puck carrier, you're on the other players need to be inside, like in wherever the defend, like here's an attacker, the net is my mouth. No wisecracks, guys. The net is my mouth, and the defender is here. He's inside, and he's where my hand is. This hand right here is an attacker. Okay, I am right now between him and the net, not between him and the net, not between him and the net, between him and the net. So as a starting point, if I can get my players, you've heard of coaches who collapse their 4 players or 5 players inside the zone. Great, they're pros. These guys, I just want them to, if they can at least be net side inside, at least that and nothing else, it forces the opposition around us. Even if we're the worst skating team with the worst sticks and the dumbest guys, at least we're forcing the opposition to go away from the prime scoring area. So I usually start with that.
Richard, I want to simplify it more. Watching teams at different ages doing HP evaluations of coaching, one team didn't have any D-side understanding. They didn't have D-zone cover. The winger was waiting on the 5 boards for a breakout when the other team had the puck in the opposite corner. They wouldn't sag. And Rick, this is the coach that when I approached him had said to me, well, they should have learned that in novice. And that to me is the biggest thing of all, even now at the U13 level, is getting them to collapse. So I use the terminology, protect the house, the home plate. You know what that means? And girls hockey, don't let them in your kitchen. All 5 there. And
that's sexist for girls hockey. Don't let them in the kitchen.
Don't let them in the kitchen. It's your kitchen. And one thing about the puck, appreciating the possession of the puck, it's not made of rubber, it's made of gold, is what I told the Japanese women. And now Jordan's line was, the puck is your cell phone. So those kinds of imagery, I think, resonate with the mind of the player, the female player, the male player. The languaging you use to simply get a picture in your mind of what, like, and I didn't have a clear picture of net side inside. I didn't realize it was the same thing. Pretty much. Is there a difference between staying between your man and the net side inside? What's the subtle difference?
Well, it's I don't know if it's a subtle difference, but I'm talking about a basic principle. We spend too much time, our coaches spend too much time on system. And I don't care what system you use, you know, whether you're going to have a defenseman chasing the forward all the way up to the circle, or coaches use all kinds of systems that I leave that up to the coaches and their particular teams. I'm talking about the basic tenet of defensive play is stay between the opposition and the net and assume an inside position in every zone. In every zone. Forecheck zone, mid zone, doesn't matter. If you are at least there, then you're in a good starting position for applying other things that I would add later. It might be angling, stick checking, 1-4 checker, 2-4, whatever. But at least start with that. That's ground zero.
Rick,
Yeah, Tom, both Tom and Richard have touched on what I was ranting about a little earlier, is knowing full that your players understand what direction you're giving them. And, there are various terminologies. My terminology is inside out. And the other way I explain that to my players is that whatever happens next needs to come through you, no matter where you are on the ice. If you're in that position with whatever responsibility you have, you're probably in the best position. Then you work from strength. You're not chasing things back to the net. It's got to come through you anyways.
and Richard, my point is that we started talking about small area games. Let the game teach. I guess the art of coaching, the right stuff, the right amount, the right time, is at what point would you bring these things up? And is it okay not to bring them up at all? But just,
No.
okay.
No, it's not. And the terminology, Rick says inside out, and there are 5 of us here. We could come up with 5 different ways of saying the same thing. I happen to use net side inside. Using my team right now as an example, I'm reflecting on some of the teams I've had in the past years ago, but certainly right now, U18 AA with a hodgepodge of skill, wherewithal. I've got 5 or 6 really bona fide AAA players for next year. The rest of them career AA players. Fine. I did that 3-on-3 game between the blue lines last night for the sole purpose of identifying who can go net side inside. Who has figured it out? We have a game tonight. I'm going to be watching for that. Did most of them get it? No. It was the first time they'd ever seen it. Will they get it 2 months from now? My bet is yes, because I'm going to keep coming back to it. And I think I'm going to come back to it next week when the team is made with 2v2. A cross ice inside a zone. 2v2 has only one other player who has to assume the right body position on the rink. One. All he's got to do is one, because the other guy is role number 3, which is forcing the puck carrier. So if I can get the second guy to look around and go, which way did he go? Like that cartoon character, which way did he go? Which way did he go? Where is he? Where am I? If they can accomplish that, and I can get all the guys understanding how to do it in 2v2, then I can build on that 3v3 or 3v2. Will I do it in the same practice? I don't know. I may. We'll see. They'll be doing that for 35, 40 minutes. They should have a pretty good idea after 35 or 40 minutes of that. And because it's competitive and it's go, 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 like they were bagged last night. We had 2 hours of ice. I had to cut it off at 80 minutes.
Rich,
they were completely spent.
I just wanted to give you another idea that I've mentioned before. It's about habits. Losing D-side is overskating, controlled skating. The theoretical idea of being reactive when you skate defensively, mastering your inside edges, toe cap, square, helps you appreciate that. So when players practice a bag skate of stops and starts and crossover, it's all out and there's really no purpose in a game. So that's why I want to teach front foot stop, T-start, snow plows, because it's related to defensive tactical skating. Now it becomes a habit. If you stop on your favorite side all the time, you're going to lose D side. You're going to overskate. So you got to stop facing both ways. Now, in terms of habits, one of the most important habits is to face the puck. And a way of teaching it is whether it's 3-on-3 cross ice and the team watching, when somebody turns their back, the coach blows the whistle. The offender has to do 3 push-ups. Everybody has to do 1. Now, the point is, you don't say anything. You want to see if the defender that turned the back, that overskated, is aware of their lack of controlled skating. And I've found that coaches tend to yell and scream and point at the kid to do 3 push-ups without just blowing the whistle and seeing if he knows, understands the point of this habit exercise. So I don't know what you think of that, but I've done it for coaches, because mentoring coaches to try it. And most of the time, they are the ones that have to let the kids see if the kid knew he was the one. And then he's going to be conscious of his skating and not losing D-side.
I would challenge you from coach to coach. I would say, all right, Wally, how can you create an activity, game, drill, whatever you want to call it, where they have to face the puck all the time? In other words, you create a constraint, which is hard to do in hockey. Create a constraint that forces the players to do this. And you track it. You go, each time I see a player not facing the puck, I'm putting a mark on the glass with a dry erase marker, and the team that has the fewest numbers of marks wins a fabulous prize. I was giving out candy to my guys last week for the winning team when we had our cross ice games. And I found out how many guys don't eat candy. Not very many. Everybody eats candy, lollipops. But that's the real challenge for us, even for us, like really experienced coaches, just the 4 of us here. There's like 200 years experience coaching here, to come up with a game, an activity, or a drill where they have to be facing the puck. And are there situations where you may not face the puck? Is it a fault for one of my players who is net side inside to be I'm skating down the rink. I've got my back to the puck, which is back there, and I'm chasing Puttock over here, okay? He's 2 strides ahead of me, but I am inside of him, but my back is to the puck. Is that wrong? In which zone is it wrong? In which zone is it right? What is the principle I'm trying to get across? Should I be penalized because he was already 2 strides ahead of me? I can't catch him because of that distance, but I am inside of him. But my back is to the puck, and I'm looking. My back is to the puck, but I'm looking. Is that wrong? So I'm asking the players, I mean, it's rhetorical for us here. I'm asking the players, is it wrong to be looking like this? Where's Puttock? He's up there. I can't catch him, but I'm inside of him. I know where the puck is, but my back is to it. Is that wrong?
No, and theoretically it isn't, because there's so many nuances
Right.
to the game. I appreciate what you're saying at that age.
At any age.
Far better to do the glass thing and keep score, and then ask them all, why are we doing it? And that's what I would change moving forward. I'm going to share with everybody something Tim Bothwell, back in the day, coaching the U of C, I was on the ice with him at a practice. It was a scrimmage, and he had a scoreboard. I kept score on the glass. Every time in the zone, you managed to move the puck forward, possess it, back to possess, advance through the zones. He kept score of those elements of getting up the ice cooperatively together in a game, scrimmage. And it made the players really aware of Tom Malloy's scrimmage, where you have to make a pass in one zone. Well, gee, you could have a breakaway, but you still got to make a pass in the neutral zone. It goes against the grain of, well, what should I do in a game? But the idea of regroup timing, that's the essence and purpose of the game. So if it accomplishes that purpose, fine. And I think I've had coaches tell me that Tom's rule of having to make a pass in one zone is huge. Absolutely huge. On a technical note, you talked about 3-on-3, 3-puck scrimmage. Was that whole ice or half ice?
Between the Blues, wasn't it?
It was inside a zone across the ice.
Okay. Now I'm just throwing this at you. If you went whole ice, goal line to goal line, 3-on-3, 4-on-4, 5-on-5, 8-on-8. And I think I've talked about this in a previous Sharks call. There's a risk factor playing rushes skating backwards. So I discovered with the U13s playing 8 versus 8 3-puck scrimmage, the best of first team to score 2 wins the game. It's the best of 3. That a player skated backwards and there was a collision. So the light bulb went on and I said, okay, let's surf only. So the advanced tactic of forechecking on playing a rush in every zone, not allowing backward skating, the deliberate purpose of that might contribute to more aggressive forecheck in all 3 zones.
Well, yeah, good point. The safety of the players is paramount. Obviously, I wouldn't have tried it if I didn't feel it was safe. I didn't add that when I had 2 pre-tryout skates last week, we had done a lead up to that where I threw 3 pucks into a zone or into a half rink, and an entire group was down there playing keep away, just keep away. And when they're playing keep away, they keep their heads up more because they're not focused on getting to the net. So that was the lead up to what I did last night. But I never do anything without putting a lot of thought into what am I trying to get out of this? Do I want this to be in a bigger space? No, because I wanted it to be in a small space to work on their quickness and agility and reading the play. I threw in the one constraint of 3-puck, 2-puck, 1-puck. I might do it differently next time, but the idea is always, what's the objective? What am I trying to get from the guys to understand what to do? Nobody asked me. One player asked, I was the same player who asked me the other question. He said to me, Coach, this is chaos. I said, yeah, that's the game. It's chaos. Right. Nobody complained about the game.
You might remember that's where we learned to play the game on the outdoor rinks.
Exactly.
There's multiple games going in all different directions.
Right. Big kids, small kids.
Yep.
Like that poem. Big rats, small rats, fat cats, tawny rats. What was it? Oh yeah, the Pied Piper of Hamelin. Yeah. English teacher. Yeah.
Well, I'm a little bit perplexed because having 3 teams to mentor at U13, I've got this whole gamut of teaching deliberate progressions, but they're tactical, purposeful, progressive to the ability to gain time and space or take away time and space in game situations. And I think I'll do that in a formal time that's given to me. And what's happening is there's a company, Global, at that U13 level, they have 6 ice sessions this year. The thing that frustrated me all year last year was talking to coaches about what they were doing and trying to get them to focus on the purpose of the drill they're doing. So I'll give you an example. Dave King's puck progression for puck protection. Rick, do you recall it?
Absolutely.
Go ahead, describe it, and I'll tell you what happened last year where I intervened.
You start with protect the dot. Players can't reach between the legs. You just circulate and shoulder check, cut them off. Just not handling the puck, and you can play keep away. Same principles. Then there's the protect race, where you take the lead.
Hold it, because I intervened because that's what the coach did. The player was stationary. He didn't let the player behind him get to the puck. We started out stationary.
Yeah, he was only allowed to circulate around the puck. He couldn't handle it to protect it.
Now here's my point. You have to start with the checker with their hands on the hip so you feel him and you can lean into him. Yep. When he did the drill, they would look over their shoulder. They got to the puck too easily. So I had them initiate the drill with hands stick on the hips, contact, feel, lean in, pivot, leg, arm, stick, protecting. So that element of touching, I brought up with the coach to make it more effective. And I think that was a valid intervention that helped them make contact, which they're not comfortable with. And then after that, it became paired passing, small area, whistle, keep away. And the idea of the puck protector in the smallness of the space being able to shield. But does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Okay. So this is where I call it, it's anal for me, and maybe anal to coaches. Those kind of details. And there's nothing wrong with realizing I've got beat. I maybe have to make contact and protect the lane, make contact to the lane in a free puck race. But teaching it at U8, U11, it can be done. And it's going to, the sooner everybody understands and is able to apply those tactical skills to the game, they're going to be more effective and enjoy the game more. So,
and that's the type of thing, Wally, I was referring to again earlier, where we need to go back and deal with it at that very basic level. Yeah. Even when I'm doing that sequence, the first part of that for me is just the power of your knees, where you can wrestle with straight leg and the weaknesses that brings out. And then with a good knee bend and a continuous knee bend, it's just a one-on-one, one stick between two players, and they're trying to wrestle each other, learning how to use their legs and their knees to stabilize themselves. The other one is the straight-legged push side by side. Stand straight leg and you can be pushed over like a twig. But spread your legs, shoulder width apart, and bend your knees, you suddenly become extremely strong. And I've done that at 70 years old with U18 players, and they're amazed at how strong you can be even at my age when they're not aware of those principles. And I don't think you can go too far back down the scale of what needs to be taught. If you have players that are not aware of it, or you're not sure they're aware of it, I think as a coach, we have an obligation to go back there and just refresh their memories or introduce it for the first time. Either way, it's a win for all concerned. And that's just on the puck protection skill. there's so many other areas of that that I've done and probably could do a better job of it. But to me, it's a principle that we need to get back to.
Richard, we're hoping to have Daryl Belfry on next week, and I'm going to read a paragraph. I gave a copy of the book to Rick to look at. It's titled, this section has got a title, Offensive Zone. And he says, OZP shape equals triangulation plus active defense plus rotation speed. So here he is using a language with the elite players in the world. What does OSP shape mean? The shape and spacing of 5 offensive players hold a duality of position. Each player is able to pressure, get above their defensive speed responsibility, and holds in rotation and side change while being aware that each position offers strong offensive opportunities and threats. Teams that struggle with offensive zone defense lose their shape and ability to quickly transition with numbers for strong positions. So here he is talking about offensive zone defense with the puck. So he's taking thinking to another level there. Now we're talking massive, those kind of guys, and they think to that degree. And I'm beginning to realize young people can think to that degree sooner than later. We're just not ready for it. So Daryl's academic approach is quite amazing. And I've earmarked a number of pages in the book. I'm going to a national team reunion in Vancouver for 3 days, hoping to get it read while I'm there, and then hoping we can get Daryl on. And I know that we can't apply this book thinking to the minor hockey level, but maybe we can. I don't know. Can't, Rich? Thoughts already?
I'd like to read a paragraph from my new novel. No, I'm just kidding. That world is so far removed from minor hockey that
Good.
it's like my talking to coaches in minor hockey about constraints, affordances, and ecological dynamics and all this stuff. In here and out there. No. What can you do for me? Show me what to do. Help me, work with my 9-year-olds, my 12-year-olds, my 16-year-olds. What I don't know Daryl Belfry. I've seen a couple of videos, I read a little bit. It's an entirely different planet. Entirely different planet. It's like somebody who can drive an Indy car and then teaching driving to a 16-year-old. Like, forget it. I'm sorry,
No, good point. I want to tell you, when COVID hit, I asked him to come on because he's a name, and I thought, gee, he gets on, people are going to come on. And he was
You're a name. Puttock is a name.
Well, he's a name more well-renowned than ours, I'm sure.
It's not important. It's important what the message is.
My point was, he's written books, you've written books, you're famous.
And
what? I got him on, and he was reluctant. He said, I've got to go for a COVID test here. I don't know how long I can stay. But in the course of whatever we were talking about, I knew he had written a book. We were going to get to that, just like we did to yours. He got so engaged. And I'll tell you one of the most important things he said about minor hockey. He was embarrassed when he coached minor hockey. 20 years after coaching minor hockey. He's shopping and runs into two players that he had coached. They turned their backs and walked away on him. So he brought that point up. I shortened the bench. The ethical coaching point he understands. And the technical stuff at the national team level, at the professional level, is absolutely brilliant. So I don't know how much we'll get out of that session, but I keep, when I'm reading a book, I keep referring back to him and texting him about minor hockey. And Richard, when I wrote the curriculum for the women's program, we have direct attack, then indirect attack, which is delays, and the nuances of triple drive, attack triangle, triple drive, fourth player joining, delays, and then low zone offense and cycling, and behind the net offense, continued 5-on-5. Well, Tom's team is learning to delay. Other players are learning to support. And if they're not there, they're learning to put it to good ice to possess it. So
That's the
where
difference.
I'm at.
You're using the word, yeah, but Wally, you're using the word learning. That's exactly right.
Yeah.
U12, U14, U15, boys, girls, chimpanzees, doesn't matter. They're learning.
Yeah.
But where Daryl Belfry lives, working with pros, they've pretty much learned it. Now,
Yeah.
how do they apply it according to the needs of that organization? You know, they've got the skill base, they've got the technical aspects down pat, they've got the conditioning, they've got coaches who are paid $2 million a year, and you know he's getting $400 an hour to teach his skills. That is not the world of minor hockey in any way, shape, or form. And I would offer, I don't think he can relate, because I've met a lot of guys like him. I had a guy do a skating session on Zoom a couple of years ago with my coaches in the Whippy girls out here. Very well-known skating instructor. And
Tom,
he did
your sound.
Sorry?
There's some interference coming.
From
Somebody
Tom.
sounds on.
Yeah, Tom's interfering. So that's like, so he did a fantastic session, really interesting session on skating. And I asked the coaches afterwards, it was very good. I don't know how to use it, but it was very good. It was very interesting, but I don't know how to use it. Well, then, you know, I wasted $300 of the organization's money having this guy do a skating session on Zoom.
Yeah. Well, on Daryl's behalf, he worked with his daughter when she was 3.
Okay, his daughter.
Yeah, his daughter 3, and she's been growing up with him. Now, one of the teaching elements was he only taught crossover starts and crossovers, because kids at that age don't learn their edges as well. So he's focused on that. And if you've looked at some of the videos I share where she talks through shifts, it's U18 girls, BWHL.
Yeah.
The vision that she has.
His daughter.
I know that.
I challenge anyone to not coach their own kids for 5 years. And let's see what you can do.
Well, all I'm saying is I've shared her breakdown of the shift because she sees the ice and is describing things that average players don't see. Can we get them to see more? Think more? And
sure.
yes, we can if we ask them versus tell them. Just reflect on what you're doing and why you're doing it.
Absolutely right.
At the youngest of ages, get them to reflect on it. Ask questions. It's minor hockey. So coaching changes. Global that runs camp, all small area games, unbelievable games. And I would like them just to take breaks so they recover from the games because they're so competitive and ask questions. So the players can think about everything that's been going on, things they could do. And I guess that's what Daryl, his first book, The Student is the Teacher. You think he's teaching Matthews anything? No way. Matthews is teaching him because he's asking him what he sees and what he thinks. So my point with the questioning process of coaching, and that's his approach, is exactly this. You can take it down to education, and Jordan isn't on. We just tell kids to memorize. They don't learn to think. And they don't know the purpose of what are they learning? Nothing really. They're memorizing. So that's my point in support of Daryl. And I'm looking forward, Richard, if you come on, because I'm going to ask questions as what can we do in minor hockey? What does it have to do with minor hockey? And I'll tell you, at your level, there's a part in the book, and I may have mentioned it. He says there's 2 triangles in the offensive zone. Boy, that concept right away, the forwards and then the movement of a forward F3 up and the D down, but thinking in threes and using each other, I think that's something kids can get.
That's something we've been doing for 40 years. Triangulation in the offensive zone.
Yeah, but
we're teaching triangles all the time.
But the interchange of the D into the lower triangle.
We've been okay.
Have you been scissoring?
Yes.
How long have you been scissoring? Because
not right at this moment because it would be really uncomfortable, but over the years, a ton.
I never heard of it until 3 years ago.
Scissoring and hinging and all the words and triangles and what's that, John?
So I've been hearing all. This is cool. I've been taking a lot of notes here, but we're talking about language and this sort of communication. And Rick, I want to get to a point here. This is great. Hey, what do you say, Wally? What do you say? The last words, triangles, and what is scissoring? Scissoring? Is that what you say, Wally?
Yeah, that's the hockey term.
Yeah. Well, so
overlapping in soccer, right?
In soccer. Well, you can say overlapping, but in soccer is a word for this. It's called permutation. Permutation is the ability to switch places where you're not occupying somebody else's space that it doesn't need. And if we go back in time, the Soviets were the first ones, not the Soviets, before that in soccer, this concept was already applied into it. So triangles and squares and octagons and whatever you want to call it there, whatever name you put in, it's always been used already. What people come up with now, you can call it, all these names that we put into it. What is a forecheck? It's a high pressure game. What is a back check? It's tracking in soccer. Simple as that. You back check, you're tracking your players. So we can use. Well, I've been doing this both hockey and soccer for so many years, and the vocabulary we use is that a choice of philosophical and etymological words that you use. That's basically it. And I think the concepts you were mentioning, all these great people from Quebec that I had the chance to hear or to see in my times in Quebec, things have changed because the game evolves every time, and we have all these new concepts in soccer. We talk about this high pressure now. Is high pressure game, constantly putting pressure, high pressure on the high zones, on the attacking zone, and some of the best teams in soccer are doing that pretty well. but it's nothing different from 40 years ago or 50 years ago. The formations, it's just formations. We talked about this last time we talked, Wally. Remember 1-3-1 in hockey? I use that in hockey. Not many people use that. I use it in soccer indoor when we play the arena version of soccer, hockey and soccer, 5 versus 5. All my teams play 1-3-1, and it was very, very efficient. The only difference in soccer and hockey is that we use our goalies more. I don't know if you guys agree. The goalies in hockey should play the puck. Point. That's my opinion. And my goalies, by the way, when they used to coach some teams, I try to get my goalies using the puck and making passes, and we pass back to the goalie, by the way. So, yeah, some guys say, "Hey, what are you doing out there? You're not supposed to do that." Well, yeah, we're using everyone. So, but that is an opinion and things here. One of the things I want to just say, Rick, that you mentioned about preparing the players, and I think this is where I think we need to sort of agreed or disagreed. I'm totally 100% behind teaching the players this. I call them preparation movements, and I call this homework. You mentioned they need to fight. They need to learn to fight. So we do a lot of dry line training, and we do combat sports. We call it the Spartan box circle, where they have to go in, and they basically wrestling. We have our rules. You're not allowed to shock people, to hit people with the elbow. But I tell you, I've done this with U8s, U9s, U10s, younger kids. Now, this is the difference I think I want to share with you. I do not tell them what to do, Rick. I don't tell them to go knee down. I let the repetition without repetition take care of that. And that's a principle in the game, that once you do something like a 200, 300, 400 times, you found a way on your own to resolve that affordance or problem. It's a solution problem that you need to resolve here, Rick. And that's what I think is the difference between, I would say, the methodology we're using. I do the same, but I use a different approach. So I will say, Rick, you get in that circle, and you have to take John and Richard and Wally and Dean. Who's going to win? And we're going to play this for 10 minutes. So I have a choice. I can tell them, get me down. Sometimes I will, go lower so you get more balance, more strength, more power, more. You got more options when you're low, right? Is that correct? It's no different in soccer. You got a very solid stand. But I basically just put the kids out there and let them deal with that. So some of our kids are bigger, taller, stronger, weaker. So they have all these sort of variabilities of fights where they start getting, how do you say, they resolve these problems on their own, and they found the solutions on their own. My purpose is to allow them to go and search for that. And we talk about this emergence of beauty. And eventually what I've seen with the girls, especially on the girls' side, because they're not used to that contact, it's pretty interesting. And the U11, U12, U13, after 1 or 2 years of doing that, oh my God. Now, I'll go from there, from this preparation movement, no sticks, dry land, no hockey, forget about that, no skating. We go on the ice, and then we play a game 1 versus 1 in a box with 2 nets, very contextual to the real game. I don't tell them anything. I just say, now you have a problem. You have to win this game. We have, I don't know, 15, 20 minutes of 1-on-1, and we have 12 players inside, 10 players. That's a good number you have to deal with. You have to play with these numbers. And they go and play that game. Now we talk about scoring here. I think Wally mentioned that about team doing that in practice. You need to keep the score. Richard, we talk about this. We need to keep the score every time. What is the purpose to play a drill? And this is the problem I have with drills. Not the problem. I don't agree with drills because we never keep the score in drills. We don't care. I said, we're doing a technical thing. Well, it doesn't help you. Contextuality is everything. And if you put the players in a fight 1-on-1 and you tell them you have 15 minutes and we're going to have 10 players on that game, who's going to win the most games, then you start putting the real pressure and what the reality is. And they're going to start learning to resolve these situations. I can add to the scoring. By the way, I call it scoring the last frontier. The scoring is what matters in games. So I always say we start with this scoring matrix, and usually what happened, Rick, how many games you won? Well, I won 4 games, but they happen this way, Rick. You win the first one, you get out. You get somebody else to score against you. Wally scored against you, Wally stay. He wins 1 game because Richard came in and beat him, and so on and so on. So usually you have these inconsistent sequences of winning. And that's what I tell players. We're not doing good yet. What I need is Rick to win 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 games in a row. Now we're achieving some sort of potentiality here that start directing the players towards understanding what this means. So I think if we add that preparation movement, like you say, we break it down. You want to break it that much down? Maybe good. Me, I say, found the solution. You're going to play 100 games. You're going to have to get good at this. And then suddenly I seen it when my players at the time and with the younger cohorts, they become so skilled at found solutions without me telling them how to do. And that's the magical thing, is how we create that magic component. How, and when I mentioned Bobby Orr, I always go back, and it's not about Bobby Orr when he played in the NHL. It's the Bobby Orr that was racing like Gretzky, any good player, who was racing at 7, 8, 9, 10. How he did it. That's my question. That's my question. How he did that. If you tell me that a coach came, and please prove it me wrong, please prove it, that he went to Bobby Orr and said in a pond, Bobby, you have to get this, you have to do that, you have to get this angle, you have in soccer, you have to align your shoulders to the. I don't think I'm going to find anyone telling me that.
John,
Pelé,
what he did, him and his dad.
yeah.
Okay.
Tell me, yeah, I will. I mean, I read his books, all his books, and I heard him talking a lot. So I wish I could talk to him one
Well,
day.
John, the one point I wanted to make is relates to what you said, and it's a deliberate part. At the kitchen table, using
Yes.
salt
Yes.
shakers, he and his dad talk through the game. In the inquiry of discussion with a father at
Yes.
his young age. So he was guided learning there. And I'm not sure if, I just think it's worth bringing. The point is the idea of discussing it, reflecting on what you're
Absolutely.
doing.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
I think, Wally, I want to make sure we understand each other here, everyone. When I say, we talk about game and everybody thinks, oh, they just play games. These guys only do games. No, I coach my kids. They play pro soccer. Junior play pro soccer. My other son is an amazing player. And they play hockey, by the way, until the age of 12. And they were bound to be very, very good. But they somehow, destiny put them through soccer. Now, we talk about soccer. And I will tell you one thing, they watch soccer a lot and hockey. They watch games. They ask when we play, they say, Dad, how you did this? I say, well, I used to be pretty sneaky when I play. So I say, I love to deceive people a lot. So they ask questions. Of course, Wally, they are the first ones that we need to pay attention because they ask questions. Rick, and I hope your players ask questions when they come to you and say, hey, Rick, how are we going to do this? And of course, it's time for feedback. It's time for, I call it whispering. It's like you give this little whisper out there. Hey, Rick, just bend your knee and wake him because you got to, I go back here. We got to teach deception, and we're not very good at. I have a question, Richard. I ask the coaches every time, and I tell coaches, how you teach 1 versus 1 before you teach 1-versus-1. And then everybody look at me like, what? What are you crazy? What are you talking about? What sort of question is that? But behind any preparation movement, Rick, like you say, is a vast complexity of knowledge that you have and that you are passing on. How you take that knowledge and provide it to the kids, that's the next simplicity that we need to come up with. And Leonardo da Vinci said it very, simplicity is the ultimate sophistication. We know that sophistication, maybe after so many years, the kids don't need to. So I'm very careful when I break down my stuff, and I do prepare the kids a lot. That preparation movement, deception, faking factory. We work on deception tons, but we do it in dry land, Rick. We never do it on the ice. On the ice, because it's so precious, like the Russians did, Soviets were experts at dry land. And we know Tarasov. If you study Tarasov, I done it intensively. I read it. I keep searching about. The guy who I'm really searching is Arkady Cherchenev as his second hand, the guy we never talk about. And he was apparently as good as Tarasov. But I cannot find anything about his writing, nothing. I've been searching him for the last 5 years. And
what's the last name?
Arkady Cherchenev.
Okay.
He was the second hand of Tarasov. And then when Tarasov went off, he went, basically, you know what? This is interesting. He won more titles than Tarasov, world championships and Olympic medals than Tarasov. So basically, by right, Arkady Cherchenev. Yeah.
He's a soccer coach.
No. So he's a Soviet hockey coach who played pro soccer too. He was a pro soccer player and a pro hockey player. So I will say a lot of the ideas Tarasov put in place on that hybrid methodology of dry land and hockey came from soccer. And I think Arkady was one of the big thinkers out there too. So going back to what Rick was saying about, and you, Wally, talk about deliberate practice every time, I think it's a place in time for that. But for me, it's homework and it's about doing in a dry land environment where you can take the time to explain things and maybe use the tactical board to talk about concepts. But when I get on the ice, I do not waste my time and deliberate practice ever and drills ever. We just play games. Now the games, Richard, we talk about this, are designed with the purpose of bringing these contextual situations that have to be resolved at that moment by the players. And this, Wally, applies to youth and to pros, because I've done it with pros in soccer. Hockey, I'm waiting to get my hands on, because hockey is no different. Soccer is no different. Pros are not different from kids. I always say they have more money, that's it. But they have the same problems tactically, mentally, to digest or to process the game. Now, remember, pros go faster. They go harder. And I go back to this thinking, you have to be very careful when you design stuff. It's about the kids. I will design one game for pros. It will be the same for the kids. But the way I measure and I apply the concept is different from one side to the other. Yet, it's the same game. Spartan box, 1-versus-1. You have to play it. You have to refine it. I don't see anyone, and even the best players right now in hockey have room for improvement. Messi have room for improvement. But the way you coach that is a different level. It's a different concept. They are in what I call in anticipation mode. It's I call it anticipation and transition awareness. Their awareness is very high. They have not much time to react to things, so they need to be anticipating. We talk about scanning.
John,
yes.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but I have to mention Greg Revac talks about Messi and exactly what you're talking about on his last posting. It is brilliant.
Yes.
That part of his IQ of
Yes, yes, yes.
interpreting the environment and making decisions. It's far beyond what we could imagine.
It's a lot of Wally. It's a lot of studies. And by the way, I talked to Greg Reback. We had a podcast last week, so we had a pretty good chat about a lot of stuff. And when you talk about Messi, Ronaldo, the great players, if you do studies or you read what they done with these guys, it's quite amazing. But again, it comes down to we go back to the same how they were raised, how they played the game, how they were free to make decisions, and how they sort of always learn in that contextual mode of game situations. And by the way, when Messi went to Barcelona, he had one of the best groups ever. And this is, I don't know if you know this, Wally, but one of the best crops of talent was that year, the year before Barcelona brought Messi in. That was the years where Iniesta, Xavi, Piqué, all the great players from that club were blossoming onto wow. And then they got Messi on top of that. So that was quite amazing. And the training they did was pretty similar to what we call in now game sense approach, or this nonlinear ecological dynamic, because Horsewayne, believe it or not, Wally, Horsewayne, who spent Vanessa spent time with Horsewayne in Germany for 5 years. Horsewayne, who was one of the best or the first guys to talk about game intelligence and game approach to teaching game sense, was doing stuff with Barcelona at that time. So when you start putting the dots together, all these things align. And I've been searching, and I tell you, I hope I have done my homework, because I've been searching and hockey and soccer, this sort of grail we talk about. So at the end of the day, like I say, they always say always lead to Rome. Everybody's taken away to go around. But I think, hopefully, I think one day we can get together and put this in a week camp and sit down together every night until 3 o'clock in the morning and create these games and apply them and see how they work, how they interact. Because that's what I keep doing it. I'm coaching now a U18 girls group. BCSPL is kind of the highest league here, like a AAA, I guess. We're at the bottom of the table. I just did another girls 3 weeks ago, but it's beautiful. I love it. I just jump in with my son, who's helping me, and we're embracing it. And it's been a very interesting thing, because the girls are, I can tell you this, they were used to that traditional approach of we tell you what to do, this is how you have to stand up, this is where you go. And now I'm coming in from another different approach, and their first 2 weeks were hard. They're like, wow, we're not used to this, John. You don't tell us what to do. I say, well, what I should. Let's go start. So I started implementing some of my approaches. Now I go back a little bit here. I do not pretend that in 9 months that I'm gonna have them, because after that they're gone. I'm gonna have the capacity to change them, but I will at least give them a taste of what ecological dynamics or a nonlinear approach means in sports. And I
John,
think they're
I'm going to
yeah.
interrupt you here because um, I I know you do what you do. You have a team and you're doing what you want to do, and you want to influence coaches to do more of the same thing. My question to all of you is my situation. All I want to do is convince three U13 coaching staff to play more small area games. How do you do that? As a paid mentor of an association. Richard, you're doing that. You're running ice times. I'm not. I'm there. I could have 15 minutes of prescribed time, but how do you convince coaches to change their philosophy of practice to being game-like, because
Run a coaching clinic, make it free. Tell the association, come on, gather up some ideas that you've stolen or thought about over the years, and give them an hour and say, all right, here's what's going on in the hockey world. What do you think? That's what I've been doing for the last bunch of years. I have these conferences. I have coaching clinics. They don't have to come. I get 20, 25, 30 coaches coming every time.
what is your role? Like,
I'm just coaching this team right now. I don't have a role.
and you say you run coaching clinics.
Well, I tell the association I'd like to run a clinic on such and such and such and such.
That's his.
And they say yay or nay. On Oshawa, they've been saying yes. Whitby girls, I've been here 7 years from Ottawa, and I've run probably, I don't know, 25, 30 coaching clinics over 7 years. I can't rely on the OMHA or the OHF because there's no leadership there. They do their thing. So I present them with ideas that I've stolen or used or borrowed, or tell them what you guys think about this. And whether or not they apply it, I don't know. Maybe seeds have to be planted and watered in little bits, here and there. But you don't try, you don't get.
Wally, I think, just to mention about this. So I have a team now in this big club. They have 5,000 players here. 5,000 players in this club. And Wally, I'm going to do education now in the club. It's called the Learning Facilitator Education in Soccer here in BC. So we're sort of teaching all these courses, active start, fundamentals, learn to train, and soccer for life. So I think hockey have some similar stuff when they coach the coaches, right? And then also, I've been talking to the club, and we're going to create. So what you saying, Wally, how you convince these coaches? My way, if I mentor them, I go to the practices and I start giving them a little bit of things. Say, okay, we're going to talk about games, and education is critical here. I think if they've never been exposed to this, it's going to be some sort of whiplash, you call. It's like they're going to be resistant to it sometimes.
Backlash.
Yeah, whiplash, backlash. Sorry.
Eyelash.
And then, yeah. So I think that's one of this. My own experience have taught me that when there's a resistance out there, because some are very tough. It's like I don't know. You know what? You're talking bull crap here. Doesn't make any sense to me. Yet other people are very open. So when you need to connect to them somehow and go from the beginning and say, we're going to try a different approach. See if you like to try these things. And that's how I've done it in the past. I've been very patient. Some of the coaches have opened big time. Others are pretty, like I say, pretty hard traditional, and they don't want to change. And that's it. And that's done. Because you need a lot of support, Wally, from the club for a leadership part. They need to support you. They need to support that change. When I was in a club for 5 years, last club in Calgary and Cochrane, I had the authority to change the entire curriculum and the entire approach to coaching. And I did it for 6 years until I left, because the new board changed completely. And they say, oh, this approach is a little bit weird. We want to go to the next level and do. I say, cool, that's time for me to go then. Because you cannot just go back and forth between these worlds. You either choose one way or the other. And, a mix, I will say, be careful. You got to be focused on what you want to do and how you want to do that. So you got to be very, very careful with that. So, yeah,
John,
I think.
John, I'm in your position. I'm being paid 8 teams in an association, and the executive of the board are in conflict.
Yes. Wow. There you
With
go.
what I'm trying to do. They're paying me, yet they're hiring parent coaches without
knowledge and yeah.
involving me in the decision-making process
Oh, yep.
and how
There
to
you go.
develop them.
Yep.
So I'm at the point, Tom, I don't know if you're on or not. Are you still there? Probably not. But I'm at the point of resigning and just doing what I want to do voluntarily with coaches that are approachable. I just want to watch hockey. And I don't need the income. I just want to make a difference. So that's where I'm at right now. Is I'm being paid. I have this obligation, Richard. I'm being paid to. I all of a sudden I've got
So,
to do
yeah.
this, but yet I can't do anything.
This
No,
is a topic for another time to
yes.
talk about the leadership roles
Well,
within an
yes,
association.
yes. I
Um,
agree 100%.
yeah,
That's
this is
it.
a very deep, long
Conversation.
topic discussion. Yes.
Wally, what I will say here, and this is my feedback, and I want to share this with you. It happens to me in Cochrane. I left because you know what I do. I'm 63 now. Gonna be 63 soon. I don't have. Yeah, wow. I'm a rookie. Wally, I
You're
don't
a
have time.
puppy.
I don't have time to waste no more. You know what I say? I don't,
Yeah,
Wally, I
right.
don't want to waste my time. You have so much to offer, so
Mhm.
much knowledge that you carry with you. Why would you waste your time with these people? So you know what I do now? And Richard, we talk about this, and within we're 100% on target on this now. We immigrate to places where we can talk, where people are willing to listen, where people are open mind and willing to experience or explore new ideas.
I'm not wasting
Yeah.
my time with
No, you can't.
associations
No,
anymore.
you
If
can.
they,
You
if to like the I gotta go here in a minute. It's over 3 hours, but
what?
A
yeah,
record today.
but you know
Come on, let's go for
the
4.
the president of the association out here, nice young guy, he unleashed on his board back in May or something when they were talking about development, and he's not a
They have no
development
idea. They have no idea.
That's
They have
exactly
no.
what he said. He unleashed on them. He says,
They,
why are you people talking about development?
they have no
Not
idea. They
one
don't
person
know.
in this room knows anything about development. Coach development, player development. There is no player development without coach development, but nobody knows anything about it. Why are you discussing development when that is not your forte? That is not your background.
Richard, and worse, they are making decisions
Yes,
that
right.
impact
Yes.
hundreds, if not thousands of players.
I was going to
There you
say more, but because this goes on YouTube, I'm not going to talk about it because
go.
Wally is going to expose me. So anyway, I have to go, guys.
Okay, guys. Okay,
I have a
Richard, thank
game
you.
tonight, and Wally, this was great. Thanks for the plug.
Thanks, Richard. I hope you come on tomorrow to bring the levity at the level with Daryl of questioning, because really we're more interested in that. Like, I enjoy watching NHL, but I care
Yeah.
more about the girls' hockey program.
Oh yeah, I love my Habs, and I watch the NHL. I watch my Habs every chance I get through my idiot box here that I get the Montreal games. But it's a different world, completely different world. I've spent enough time with the pros and the pro teachers, the instructor guys, the development guys. Go away.
Go away.
Go away.
Okay, guys.
All right.
Thanks for your time,
No,
John.
no, thank you. Thank you for inviting
Thanks.
me.
Thanks,
It's been
fellas.
great. Okay, thank you.
Take care.
Thank you. Take care.
care.
Yeah,
Bye-bye.
bye.
Bye.